your place. Coulda never take the molly that no day off his face. Lock off the wolf and the brownie done bake. Freedom of weed, so we do it at J.A.
Okay. Latinas make history every day. Okay. Can you read it for me? Well, how do you say this one? Latinas make history every day.
Happy Friday morning, everyone. My name is Talia. I am here physically at 91.3 FM WBNY. It is Friday morning. You do spend time with me at around 10 a.m. I have an amazing co-host. Leslie, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
I have an amazing co-host that's been joining us for a mini-series titled Legacy in Action, a storyteller's journey in civic engagement. I'm going to give Leslie the floor, but I'm going to thank her for joining me for this mini-series and say how excited I am for today's episode, which is the official finale. Leslie, do you want to take the floor?
Sure, but before we do, I need you to give me a little bit of your bio, because this is our end of this series, and this is all leading up into the Albert Williams Voter Engagement Day.
So excited.
Held on his birthday. Yeah, on Sunday. And so I want to, I don't think that we have honored how this all culminated. So I want to just take a moment and not only thank Talia for opening up Latina Her Story to us, but also to connect the dots of how Latina Her Story and a slain voting rights activist from Tennessee, black voting rights activist from Tennessee, 1940, and his great-grandniece, how we all are living the same truth.
Yeah, like what are we even doing here, Leslie? Absolutely. I'm so excited. So essentially in my lens, you and I connected because we both have projects that are centered around legacy. My great-grandmother had the privilege of participating in the March on Washington. She was born in Puerto Rico without the right to vote. Many women did not have the right to vote in Puerto Rico until the late 1930s. So she was an activist, and I started Latina Her Story about 3 years ago during COVID when she had passed, Leslie, and I wanted to connect with her. Like, she was the person that I would go to for wisdom. So I decided to write about different women every month, like champions, like regular people who are champions. And that's how I felt when I met you. You and I connected in a digital space, and I remember just messaging you and being like, oh my goodness, you have this project that's centered around someone's legacy. It also has a civic engagement, very centered, democratic like perspective. I just wanted to learn from you. And then, we just happened to be on the radio, and I just happened to beg you to come to the radio. And because I am totally, I begged you. And because I am totally non-committal, I can definitely say that I begged you to come to the radio multiple times because I just wanted to learn from you and learn from the people around you, and also talk about your evolution. And so just wanting to learn from you.
I also want to make sure you skimmed over 2 points that I think are important.
Okay.
One is that, yes, your grandmother came here and she had a sense of civic engagement before
Absolutely.
the vote.
Yeah.
And she had a sense of who her neighbor was before, quote unquote, citizenship.
Yeah. And I think
that is
go ahead.
translated to you, and that's exactly how our family. And it was not safe to vote in Brownsville, Tennessee. You couldn't vote at all until 1960, and it was not safe to vote till many years later. But our family has been civically engaged from the jump, from as far back from the 1800s, and our neighbors and who we care about is also not represented by any piece of paper.
Well, I'm just so excited to have you and our guest here. I think for me, good Americans are those who every day wake up and love democracy and participate, right? And that's
Mhm.
why I love your project because I think for me, it's the celebration of the privilege that we have. And also, I think one of the things that we touched on and that we may come back to is honoring the people who uphold that privilege and honoring all of the people in your family who are veterans and like people really work so that we can have the privilege to participate in democracy. Just elated to have you as a neighbor and mentor. Learn so much from you and like definitely on Team Leslie. So very
Okay.
excited to have you lead the
So,
conversation here.
right. So, and the next thing is I just had a couple housekeeping items. I want to, well, it's not really housekeeping. I want to make sure that people know who Albert Williams is. I'm so excited uh, to be a part of what I consider a flip of his legacy. His legacy was very hushed and almost shameful as I grew up. It was, he was um, it- taken out in his pajama pants and T-shirt by the sheriff and led into a mob and killed um, supposedly for his work with the NAACP. That's the story that I had, and I thought, wow, he sounds like a hero. But I didn't have anything. I didn't have a Google. I didn't have Encyclopedia Britannica. I had nothing
Right.
concrete until January 17th, 2015. That is when I came in contact. Well, I received a letter or a package, excuse me, and it had a bunch of files. And it was from a cold case investigative lawyer named Jim Emerson. Jim Emerson, who, as he calls it serendipitously, came upon the story of Albert Williams, was astounded that he hadn't heard the name before, and he's a lifelong Tennessean. And then he connected with the powerhouse that we're going to hear from in a couple of minutes, John Ashworth, who is a self-taught historian and, well, actually, is so many things, and veteran. And so, uh, when within a week, after I made contact, they actually came to Michigan and met me with a life-size picture of um, not only the initial Brownsville chapter, so it was the first time I was able to see an actual image of Albert Williams and some of the work they were doing, but I also, which was very touching, Mr. Ashworth had taken a picture from my blog he found of me, my daughter, my mom, and my grandmother, so the four G's,
Oh, your
and blown
grandma.
it up. Yeah, it now lives over on my mom's wall. Yeah. And I was just so it was just so touching, right? And so I've been since 2015. I've just been knee deep in this, like all in. We reopened the case, or not me personally, but we all took a role in helping to reopen the case. There's been a historical marker now um, that was part of the 75th memorial in 2015 that I was able to attend. Um, there's been all this discovery, just a constant discovery phase of the legacy, and it's beautiful. And I also, what happened is, as a byproduct, when I came back, my grandmother wasn't as scared anymore, and so she started to talk about Albert Williams not in quiet, scared he died, but about who he was as a person, like her uncle, her favorite uncle. And before her memory issues set in, I was able to talk with her. Uh, you know, not a, she didn't remember everything, but she remembered things, and also about other family members that were connected. So to not talk about Albert Williams also meant not to talk about cousin Earlene. You know what I mean? Because they were connected. It also meant not talk about Auntie Anne. So there were other. It was like an unlocking, a process of unlocking. And so the legacy, I wanted. The reason I founded last year, I started this Albert Williams Voter Engagement Day on his birthday. Is I want his his legacy to not just be connected to his traumatic and horrible death and the martyrdom, which is important, but also to talk about the life and the expectancy. The name Albert means noble. It means, someone who is um, like articulate and above others. And so I want to, and as a mother, which we've talked a little bit about, when you have a baby, you see them as the next president immediately, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And
And so,
education is so important. You're really
yeah,
giving us so much richness in the dimensional history that we can bring to our children. Like, I think it's important that, like you said, we involve our children and they know these stories of celebration. And Leslie, you're
great.
doing that for us. And that's why I'm just so grateful to you.
Yeah. So we had all this hope. I just know all this hope that was built around Albert Williams and the family and his immediate family, long extended family, and in the community. And it was all lost when he died. And I want to bring some of that back because I'm inspired by his story. And so that's this whole idea of legacy and action. And um, the next voice that I'm going to introduce you, I'm going to give a little bit longer introduction than I usually do because that's how awesome he is. He is the Albert Williams Voting Corner. He is a African American and Tennessee historical advisor. That's how I've termed him. But he has a background as a serving as a veteran for 21 years. He served in Vietnam, aviation management for 2 decades. Also, his educational journey has taken him to various institutions, including Tennessee State University, Columbia College in Missouri, Eastern Michigan University in Ypsilanti, hey, that's my area, and DeVry Institute of Technology in Atlanta, Georgia. In 2007, he returned to Brownsville, which is where he was originally um, spent many of his formative years, and he just delved into his interest in African American history. And he has a particular interest and fascination about Black political and economic empowerment, and has dedicated himself to exploring how marginalized African Americans have used their innate intelligence to overcome adversity. This inquiry led him to pose a thought provoking question: why does racism persist in a nation supposedly built on Christian principles and values? And so, without further ado, I'm going to introduce or bring on Mr. John Ashworth.
Good morning, Leslie. Thanks for that introduction. I'm not sure who you were talking about, but thanks for that an awesome introduction. Um, what I do live here in Brownsville. I did chair the Elder Williams CLD, the Elder Williams Memorial Committee, and Leslie, as you said, his legacy is one that we have to revere because it goes to the heart of one of the things that I think about, how our ancestors used their native intelligence, and not only that, how they understood, how they very clearly understood about the benefit of formal education during that period, how government and policies and voting and all of that works. So I'll go ahead and let you lead the conversation.
And Mr. John, Mr. John Ashworth, this is Willie H.
Hi, Willie.
I'm part of the crew
Hi,
here.
Willie.
Are you in Brooklyn, New York, my man?
No, I'm not.
Oh.
I am a native Tennessean, but I must share very quickly with Talia.
Okay.
Talia for 4 years. I was during my military time. My home state was Fort Buchanan, Puerto Rico.
Really?
I was in and out of San Juan probably 2 or 3 times a month.
What a blessing.
Know it very, very well. I was due to station at St. Croix. I traveled between St. Croix, St. Thomas, and San Juan on a continuous basis.
Well, sir, I'm so excited to have you here, and that just goes to show you what an amazing experience some of service can involve.
But can I ask you one quick question, please?
Yes, sir.
And in your intro, when you talked about yourself, you talked about your grandmother.
Yes.
And you said she came to the States in 1950, I think you said?
So she...
Or in the 50s, but she couldn't vote.
Yeah. So,
Did I hear?
sorry.
Was that she couldn't vote in Puerto Rico, or she couldn't vote once she got to the United States?
She wasn't able to vote in Puerto Rico. Who could vote in Puerto Rico on the island actually was subject to the legislative body in Puerto Rico. And Puerto Rico had a residual class system that leaked into the political system. And my grandmother and many of my relatives were part of a class that's known as jibaros. They were working people who worked the farm, and there were poll taxes and literacy tests and other challenges that we know have been historically utilized in other places and in other nations to isolate them. So women of the Jibaro class were not given explicitly the right to vote, until the late 30s. So there were suffragists who were actively advocating for female rights. There was one such suffragist who was actually arrested for just wearing pants. So there's a very strict gender kind of influence in the political system. So my grandmother in Puerto Rico was born in 1923 and was a child and into her maturation up until World War II, sir, was part of a class of people who were working to have a more participatory role in their local politics on the island.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem.
Not at this time, but I would love to talk to you again later. But please, Leslie, as I said, you lead, I'll follow.
Yeah. So, so one of the questions that Mr. Ashworth and I are always tossing around is how to. So there is more so than ever. We're hearing the full story, right, of uh, legacies, how names that I hadn't heard as a youth, like Ella Baker, is one that
Yes.
came up. If it wasn't for Ella Baker, we wouldn't have probably heard about Martin Luther King and Fannie Lou Hamer, who I didn't know about, so I was probably 20. You know what I'm saying? And of
Yes.
Mississippi. So knowing about these different people, um, and honoring who they were and what they did is so important. But and there are more so than ever. There's markers. There's some sort of museums and that kind of thing, and then that's important work and it's healing work. But then there's
It,
also this group of folks that are connected to creating meaningful change in the present that all sometimes don't understand or understand the relevancy of what happened in 1940, for instance, and you know what I mean. So they're like working in competition instead of concert. And so, could you talk a little bit about how you see that?
well, let me go back to one that you mentioned, Ella Baker. And one of the very interesting things when we talk about legacy, as both of you just pointed out, your your female ancestors and the power that they played in your lives and in the lives of their communities, although they got no recognition for it. I mean, it was just a place where women were. Cornel West said, we probably would not have known Martin Luther King as we know him had it not been for Ella Baker. One of her famous quotes that she says that I take constantly, oppressed people, whatever their level of education, have the ability to see the world for what it is and move to transform it. And I think that's true when you look at the legacy of a Fannie Lou Hamer, when you look at the legacy of an Albert Williams, when you look at the legacy of all of these people who did not have platforms, but they were very clearly able to see the world for exactly what it is, to see society for what it is. And there is a very long list of that. I was doing some research the other day, and what I found very, very interesting, we talked about the American Proclamation as an example, but the people who were enslaved, they knew about what was coming. There was no Facebook, there was no social media, but they had the ability to communicate, to understand, and actually make plans and actually execute those plans to take advantage of that and make a way for all of us. So that's the legacy that all of us sit on. Those enslaved people clearly understood, those, especially those men who ran away to emancipate or to free themselves to join the Union Army. knew that they were fighting for freedom, and they clearly understand what all of that meant. They understood that things the Emancipation Proclamation, that they may not have been sitting in the halls of Congress, but they clearly understood that. So when we talk about legacy, and we look at all of the legendary people in our background, especially those who did not have platforms, power, or position, and what they were able to do, when you look minutely at that, you really get a much greater appreciation for how they use their native intelligence.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that I wanted to connect with Leslie about is just how different communities were tied together and how that played into the character of what we know is now our nation of America, that there were different communities working together so that that information could flow and that the good news could be shared so that people were prepared to participate and, as you alluded, sir, give their life to the Union Army. And thank you for your service as well.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, continue.
No, I was just going to say, the one thing that I think about that you mentioned that I said, when I started the project after retiring, and I started to look at African American, and I wanted to see it through the lives again of using that native intelligence. But when I come back and think about this country and say, we live in a capitalist country. We have a representative form of government. And really, I don't know that we have really taken the time to help, especially our younger people, understand what those two things really mean in and of themselves. What does it mean? Because quite frequently we say it's a democracy and another time we know it's a republic. Those things have very important meanings. And I can tell you that a lot of the people that we talk about in a legacy context, I think had a much, much better understanding of what those things meant than a lot of people do today. That may be because we've taken civics out of school. I do not know. But again, an idea that I tossed around with Leslie, which came first, capitalism or the republic? Well, capitalism came first. And so then the question becomes, well, was the Constitution created to support capitalism? And that's a very interesting academic argument at all levels. Stanford University has very good research on that. Many others that have done that. But I think for minority communities who come out of the oppressed experience, going back looking at their ancestors' understanding of what they were able to achieve and to accomplish. I often think of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we talk about that, and we talk about it from the standpoint. We pick up from the day of the massacre and afterwards. We don't talk about before the massacre, how they created that. And that's true for a lot of very viable communities all across this country.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Leslie.
Right. But what's interesting about, I haven't, oh my goodness, I'm going to forget her name, just published a book, the last living survivor from Tulsa, just published a book last month.
Yes. I know the one you're talking about.
Her name is escaping me, but one of the things she says is they knew what was happening. The wool wasn't pulled over their eyes because they did have a community, and yes, there was economic empowerment within the community, but there also was a passing down. People knew who they were.
Yes.
They were securing their identity. They knew who they were.
And Leslie, I'll give you a very interesting side note or a tidbit. One of the eyewitness observers of the Tulsa massacre was the father of the noted historian John Hope Franklin. Buck Miller, I'm trying to think of his full name there. But my point in telling you that, Leslie, is that John Hope Franklin's mother was from Brownsville, Tennessee. She comes out of the same soil that Elbert Williams comes out of.
Yeah,
and they were there living in Tulsa, Oklahoma when that occurred.
I'm
Oh,
just
wow.
I'm just so grateful to hear both of you. And one of the things I just wanted to recenter on, because I think that it's been a common thread throughout multiple parts of our conversation, is the importance of state universities so that conversations like these, both political, historical, sociological, of the American character can continue, and also the importance of like supporting HBCUs and the rich academic culture that the HBCUs and public universities support. So I
Yeah.
know we mentioned several of them that are connected to us, but just another big thank you to 91.3 FM WBNY and SUNY for allowing me the privilege as a neighbor to come on and share Latina history. And I'm just really excited to be in network with both of you who I really see as live educators. And I really know are sharing legacy that wouldn't otherwise be shared. If Leslie, if I could ask a question, I know that you're tied to an institution, sir, one that you've worked to support locally. Leslie, I'm not sure if we were able or planning on touching on that, but that was one of the things I wanted to highlight because I think curation of history in the forms of monuments and museums are so important, but it also is a form of leadership. So I just wanted to thank you for that as your neighbor and also say that it's been given me a further clarity in how to like solidify the legacy of my grandma.
Mhm. Mhm.
Did you want to mention the
Right.
name of the museum, sir?
So, so Mr. Ashworth, I think she's talking. He's into so
Oh,
much.
I'm sorry.
He's
I'm
co-founded the
sorry.
Dunbar Car Museum in
Yeah,
Brownsville.
that's the one I was referring to.
He's the current
Oh,
treasurer
okay.
of the Geneva Miller Historical Society. He's a current board member of the Tennesseans for Historical Justice and Lynching Sites Project of Memphis. And he was one of the founding members of the Albert Williams Memorial Committee.
But Khalil, what was your question again? Make sure I answer it.
The first museum, sir, the one that Leslie mentioned, I
Yes,
just wanted to
yes.
one kind of is two part. One, thank you for your leadership and curation of history, and then just ask if you could share a bit about the museum or kind of what led you to want to curate history in this way.
Okay, let me give you a little bit of my background. I was actually born in Wilson County, Tennessee, which probably has the African American population. I'm going to go somewhere around 8, maybe 9%. So that's where I lived until my mother and father met in college. My mother died from my birth, and I grew up with my grandparents. And my father, they came to West Tennessee around 1942. She got pregnant with me. She went back. I was born. She passed. I lived with my grandparents until my grandfather died. And in '56, I came to Haywood County. Haywood County has always been and is today majority African American.
Okay.
But coming here as a young child, visiting my father, the one Sunday afternoon, or one Saturday afternoon, and this was typical across the South during that period, people who lived on farms and sharecropped would come in on Saturdays, they would shop, a lot of it on credit, but there would just be this horde, just masses of black people that would be in the town. So I had never experienced that. But one Saturday afternoon, visiting my father, we went uptown late in the afternoon, and as we approached downtown, I saw this massive horde of black people. I thought, where did they all come from? What was this really all about? And I did not understand the legacy then. It was many, many, many years later. But it is probably that moment that peaked my need to really, really understand the African American experience in this country, which led me to return to my hometown and pick that up as a passion. I mean, I remained interested throughout my career, but I just didn't have the time to devote to it as I did once I retired. One of the schools is still across the South. Integration came about. A lot of black schools closed down. The one that I graduated from here in Haywood County closed down in 1970, but the building remained. And some years after that, a group of the students got together in Detroit and said, wouldn't it be great if we formed the Alumni Association? And they did that and had chapters all over the country. It was a 501c3 with the idea that we were, in fact, going to create this museum to tell the story of the African American experience in Haywood County, because that branched out once we did that. Haywood County, and at that time, Fayette County, unique to Tennessee, were the only two counties where the access to the voting polls was denied to African Americans, and no one black voted in this county until 1961. And so it's kind of out of that background and out of that experience.
After that, people were retaliated against and put out of their
very
homes.
much so.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very much so.
Yeah, it wasn't the tearful eyes on the prize thing. It was like they were still, even in the 60s, risking their lives and risking their homes and their families' livelihood and jobs and everything just to vote.
And what a privilege it is to lift up the leaders in that place now, who I know are actively working, and I, obviously acknowledge the both of you to be able to have an active and present community politically with that legacy, right? Because I think that both of you acknowledged so much of us learning about our history is to inform our action going forward. So shout out to the leaders in that place. And, thank you both for coming here and sharing your history.
Right.
We're at the end of the Underground Railroad traditionally. And I think just the geography between all three of us, Willie, thank you for facilitating the conversation, is just incredible for me and for the rest of us at 91.3 to hear some of the stories.
Mm-hmm. So I wanted to lift up a little bit about the process, because
could you share that?
One of the things that we have, what has been interesting, because it went from I didn't feel like anybody was interested in the story. Like, I immediately was like, this is so exciting, I can't believe this, and then. But there has to be kind of buy-in when you talk about storytelling, especially. And what I think that what has to happen is people have to see themselves within the story, right? And so one of the things or a couple of the things that have been, I think, have resonated with people when I tell the story, and even the members of the Voting Corner, because we have had a few events now where we've helped people to register to vote or learn their voting rights or what's on the docket. And I always bring a little photo album of family members and stuff, because it's his story, but it's really our family story. And people are surprised to find that this wasn't the KKK and all the stuff that we hear. It was actually state-sanctioned kidnapping, with law enforcement coming to the house, and so that's something that people don't understand. Also, a lot of people don't understand or think about that when Albert Williams and other members of the NAACP, it wasn't like we want to vote because that's our right. No, it was like they had actual things that they wanted to do with the vote. So, it was the vote was valuable to them because they knew there was a better life if they could do something about police brutality, about the issues around jobs and around land ownership, and with the court system. Those were the issues of their day, and in some places, a lot of places, it's still the issue of the day.
Can I just add something there, Leslie?
Yes, please.
Yeah, one of the very compelling reasons for the formation of the chapter in 1939 with Albert Williams like this is the fact that Roosevelt was running for president, and the word had gone out that Roosevelt was going to be a friend to African Americans, and one of the major people at that time was Mary McLeod, the King Cookman, who had a voice with him, and so the NAACP was trying to make this major push to get as many black people registered as possible, and that is one of the impetus behind the 1939 formation of the NAACP chapter in Haywood County. And you're right, there were a number of people, if you look at that picture, there were a number of people in there, and especially some of the women who were very, very prominent, but did a lot of risk. to make that
Absolutely.
happen.
Absolutely. And I think that for me as an American, as we move to just I had one more question about you, sir, and your service. But for me as an American, when I think about bravery and when I think about liberty and when I think about what makes our country so special, I think about like how do you what is innate about bravery as a mother? How do you instill that in your son, right? And I think that's why I bought Leslie the book and just was really interested in learning about like the culture of your family, Leslie, and what inspired that bravery in your uncle and also in you. But also, I think that that's like a very American sense of participatory, like wanting to serve your neighbors almost. And I really would pose to the both of you, and I think I'd be very interested in knowing like what do you individually both think contributes to the individual bravery that someone has to be able to lead in politics, whether it's in the past, now, or today, to be able to put their hat in the race like many of the people in my generation are, that I'm so ridiculously proud of.
I,
You can go
I,
first.
I can give you a very quick, answer on
I'm
that.
so
I
excited.
think it's hope.
Okay.
I think it's hope, and I'll tell you why I think it's hope.
Mhm.
In the Revolutionary War, in the Civil War, and in every war this country has fought in, African Americans and other oppressed people have always seen that as a way to gain greater access to the freedoms of this country. They've always done that, whether they receive it immediately or not. There's a whole other story that I could go into. And to me, let me just say, in my time serving in the military and being in Puerto Rico, the amount of pride that the young men from Puerto Rico took in being military, their bearing was always superior anytime I was around them. And they had the same hope and aspirations for complete acceptance. So that's always been there. That's what gives us the courage, is that we are fighting for a better day that we know we can have in this country.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. So I would I I think hope is one for some people, and I also think um when we talk about courage, there's more than one type of courage. And I was speaking at an event this past Sunday, and I said, you can have courage that comes from the hip, the lip, or the heart. You know what I'm saying? And so, um, uh, I think everybody has courage if they feel like it's worth it. And because I find a lot of courageous people within my family and in the black community, and they're not attached to politics, whatever. They show courage every day. Do you know how much courage it takes to go out here and sell drugs?
Yeah,
That's a lot of courage.
that's
I
a
was like, you gotta
that's a
have.
that's a lot of
It's a
courage.
lot.
I agree. I agree.
That's a lot of courage. They
Yeah.
feel like that's what they put, and then maybe it is a form of hope, but that's what they put. This is how I'm going to risk it because I think there's something better on this other side of the selling this or getting this money or whatever. Um, but it's just, and this is how I believe in multi-generational approaches, is bringing it back to understanding how important, and that's what how Mr. Ashworth was saying, that our forefathers and mothers understood. There is um, there is a hope, and there's only one way to really get inside to make long term change, and that's through the franchise of the vote, right? And being civically engaged. And so so redirecting that courage. I don't think we have my so when I grew up, I was a kid in the '90s, or I was like a teenage, whatever, and we used to say this thing, and it's so politically incorrect, but I'm gonna say it today. And we used to say, ain't no hoe in my blood," and
Ooh.
so.
Does that mean you're not afraid?
Ooh.
Yeah,
Okay.
like my mama wasn't afraid, my daddy wasn't afraid, we
Yeah.
ain't afraid, like
Yeah.
we just say that,
Oh,
and it was
okay.
so horrible. But the essence of that is like I have courage, so I think a lot of us have courage. It's just directing that courage around things that will actually benefit us long term and benefit our communities and benefit our families. You know what I mean? And until you understand how to be civic and have that mentorship and that the inclusion and having a place and a role, you don't know where to direct that courage, So it's like people, I have there's stories of people having courage over a pair of Cartiers or a pair of shoes. Direct that courage in a way that can be, can bring, a different result. That's all.
But,
Yeah.
but think about something that I once heard some juveniles say, we have tried the possible. It hasn't worked. And I'm saying that to say, I don't know that there's really a great deal of difference between the courage that you see of people who go out and sell drugs today versus the people who go out and risk their lives in a society that was determined to press them down because there was no other opportunity. And so I think the whole idea, and I agree with the courage is there because I want a better life. If you deny me the normal, acceptable ways of doing it, I'm going to find another way of doing it. But both of those are courage.
Yeah, and I think for me,
thank you. That's what I was trying to say.
Absolutely. And I think for me as a historian, what's really important for Latino history is that we get out of this lie that we're telling ourselves that once upon a time there was a perfect American. The men that shaped this country, right? The men that shaped this country were eccentric, and some of them were good and some of them were bad and some of them were good and bad at the same time. And I think that we use this value system to evaluate ourselves sometimes that really wasn't present when it was time for us to become formed as a nation. And it's like almost we're doing ourselves a disservice. I'm so proud of our history and of our uniqueness. Willie, as we move to close the show, Leslie, can you share how our listeners at 91.3 FM WBNY can support the Albert Williams voting corner, how they can participate in the day? I know for Latina history, we're really committed to sharing everything and also sharing some resources for families that will be curated by you and others to talk about, the complexity and beautifulness of race and the stories that we have to share with our families. Leslie, how can they support you? How can they join Team Leslie? Because it's a real place, and I'm in it.
So Shantae and I were talking about our terms. We don't call it the community of cousins. That's what we're trying to build around the Albert Williams
She's
voting
amazing.
corner. We want not only people to be connected because of Albert Williams and they might be blood related, but just that they can embrace that story, because I feel like everybody who's working towards a better democracy is a descendant of Albert Williams, which is what he was trying to do. And so just go to albertwilliamsvotingcorner.com. It is grassroots. It's literally me and a friend pulling this website together, and as we have time. So it is growing, and I just want to say, just come back every week or two, and we plan to have our the voter engagement day, which will be on Sunday. I'm going to do something local, but not this time. We won't have anything big and digital, but there's ways for you to get involved, and we also started a mutual fund so that we can help grassroots candidates that are running for office and grassroots organizations that need help getting money. So that'll all be populated on the website very shortly. And we'll also have a recap of all of this mini-series, which has been great to kind of put things in a form. So it's not so many different pieces.
Hey Leslie, I'm on Team Leslie too. Are you saying you leaving? Are you leaving us?
She can't. You can't. She's taking a break from us, but she can't leave us.
She is taking a break?
I don't know.
Well,
I don't want her to.
I just got her pretty picture on the current. I got a current picture of Leslie, and I got it on. Now I'm like, oh, guys, she can't be leaving now.
Having Leslie calling from Michigan makes our show national.
Oh,
so
okay,
I'm just
cool.
like, we have to do this.
Yeah.
But Leslie, please don't leave us. Please join us again for future miniseries.
I love you guys, so I ain't going to go too far.
Thank you. I'm so excited, and definitely we will at you, and we'll definitely make sure to share your Facebook and the website. There's so much knowledge and curation and beautiful people that you've brought to 91.3. I'm just really grateful to be part of knowing your story, Leslie.
Oh, and I want to give a big shout out to Willie, who has been our producer to this series.
Hey,
Yeah,
thank you.
so he didn't come in with a whole script and what we're going to do and bullet points. We just said, "Can you help us?" And he said, "Yeah." And then
My pleasure. My pleasure.
And can we say why today and why this guest is our culminating show, Leslie? Can you share that with everyone? Because this is a
Mr.
big deal
John
for me.
Ashworth is I he is who I consider a mentor, first of all. But more so than that, he and his family have become friends. Um, and so uh, when you have when your family is put into in some ways refugee status, that's how our family was. It was a terror campaign that was launched, and so um, outside of a few visits here or there, most of the family did not come. A lot of the family did not go back and forth to Brownsville, Tennessee, for many years. And in fact, I found out later, after the fact, when I went in 2015 for my first time, my grandmother, one of my aunts, and two of my cousins that were all older and of that set were scared. They were scared that I was too outspoken, that I was going to get into trouble down there, and they were going to hurt me. 75 years later.
Yeah.
And so I guess what I'm saying is that Mr. Ashworth and his family, and also as another family, the Duckworths, Betty and John Duckworth, were they stood in as family when I went down there. They opened up their home and their lives, and um, I was a part of a Father's Day celebration with the Duckworths the first time I went there.
That's so
And
special.
I know. I was like, oh my gosh, I wish I had a grandpa.
That's sweet, Leslie.
Yeah.
People love you, Leslie. You have a
I
very
love it.
beautiful spirit. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. And Mr. Ashworth, thank you so much for joining us on 91.3 FM WBNY.
Great.
Thank you for your service and for starting that museum and all of the things that you contribute to. I think your leadership obviously is going to infect generations of people, but I'm so excited to have a piece of it here at 91.3 FM. And I just wondered if you have any advice for any budding historians or people like me who spend a lot of time thinking and learning about history, if you have any advice about how to use that history to bring it into practical terms and make us stronger leaders.
I would encourage every single person to dig into your family history and learn as much as you can. Let me tell you why I say that. I have an actual copy of the daily cell of my great-grandfather. I know where my name came from. But in knowing that, I also went back and looked, and I actually did a presentation about the men that were involved in that transaction. Who were these people? What was going on at that time? Because all of that helps you better focus who you are, where you are, and where you're going. And before we leave today, I really would like to talk to you again because I'd like to know more about your mother's experience and the things that took place in Puerto Rico, living in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. There's a very interesting story around all of that. But again, the one thing I would say to everybody, take the time to start with the oldest relatives in your family and begin to document and videotape and find out who they were and what they did and what they know.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. You and your leadership are tremendous. Leslie, thank you for spending time with us here. Willie, as we close the show, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I enjoyed the show. Thank you. I just want Leslie to know, don't go nowhere. We want you. We want to hear you.
And Mr. Ashworth, if you could come back, we would love you for you to come back
Yes.
too, but we really need Leslie to stay with us, so we want to make sure she knows that.
Well, as I said, I mean, she and I talk all the time. We talk about having all the different age groups in the room. And I said, whatever groups you got, whatever you can classify, whatever age group, if there's 10 different age groups, they have 10% of the voice in the room. So I think it's very important. And I'm certainly glad you guys are doing what you're doing. Willie, Talia, Leslie, great being with all of you. And I hope I've added something of value to the conversation.
Absolutely, you have, sir. And I just want to acknowledge all the Puerto Ricans that are in Tennessee. and all the Puerto Ricans that are in all the different places that we've talked about. And Leslie, your leadership, how you've brought unity to our communities during Hispanic Heritage Month, and brought more perspective to me. Coming up on my 34th birthday, 34, I'm so excited and grateful. So thank you again, 91.3 FM WBNY. This is just a reminder of why I love this space and Friday mornings. Thank y'all for listening, and thank y'all for joining Latina History.
Okay. Latinas make history every day. Okay.
Can you read it for me?
Well, how do you say this one?
Latinas.
Latinas make history every day. Okay.
And I got